This is the second time I've recorded this video. Honestly, what I'm going to say here is not going to be much of a spoiler for the Onyx Pathcast episode that they put out, episode 300, with the Curseborne actual play, but I am going to go deep dive into the mechanics and some of the setting material that I was able to glean from this actual play. As a heads up, there's going to be an ad midway through for Neon Lords of the Tostic Wasteland core rules, and I want to thank Super Savage Systems for sponsoring this video. If you want to know about the story of Izzy, Cassie, and Eve, you should watch that, or listen to that rather, in a link that'll be down below. Be sure to listen to the next Onyx Pathcast on March 8th, because that is when Rich Thomas is going to be interviewed by the Onyx Pathcast crew, and it seems to be Curseborne related, depending on what you think from this Monday meeting notes thing about the podcasts being glitchy, which is code for Curseborne. I'm using a lot of words. I'm going to have to edit those out, but I'll try my best. Disclaimer, even though I've done work with Onyx Path in the past and currently, I am not privy to any information about Curseborne. Now, first up, as we get started here, there is Eve, played by Dixie Cochran, Cassie Cassandra, who is played by Eddy Webb, Cassie or Cassandra, obviously, the nickname, and then there's Izzy, played by Matthew Dawkins. Eve is a Bathorite, which the terms used for a Bathorite include hungry and undead, so it seems like the classification of the accursed, which is the template for Curseborne. Accursed can be either outsider, hungry, or primal, and there are likely more that we don't know about yet. For Cassie, she is a Nephilim, which is also known as an outsider, and then for Izzy's Lycan, she is also known as a primal, a get of Lyca, and it seems like her family is in packs, sort of like werewolves. But first up, we need to talk about the Torments and Lineages. This was a word that got thrown around for something that Izzy had, which was it's something that she could use to get more curse dice. Effectively, it is forced behavior, or not forced, but if you go into this behavior, you get more curse dice. I'll go into those in a little bit, but her Torment was target the biggest and most dangerous threat, and Eve's was basically bow down to authority. We did not see Cassie's Lineage. Curse dice are gained by fulfilling an obligation to your role or family path, players coming together to solve a problem, acting in accordance with your family behavior. Curse dice can be spent on several abilities. Spending all of your curse dice cause an effect to occur. In particular for Cassie, as she was the only one who spent all of her curse dice, the effect was the unearthly effect, which would reduce all bonds to 0, and I believe it was all bonds to her, but it seemed like it affected a lot more people than just her. There were a group of people around her, and it seemed like they lost their bonds to their leader. I'm not sure if that's true. I might be reading into the situation a little bit too much. There was an ability that Dixie used that gave her curse dice on a roll, and she didn't know what would happen if she rolls the dice, if they affect anything differently. Since the rules are in flux, Danielle, the story guide, made a call saying that curse dice couldn't be used off to buy complications, which, if you're familiar with the Storypath system, Storypath Ultra, complications are a difficulty value that's on top of the normal difficulty, which means if you don't buy off the complication with extra successes, you succeed, but you take a minor negative effect. There's additionally, they did talk about paths occasionally. There was the roll path and the family path. Roll path seems to be like just the normal roll path, but the family path, I wonder is it your path within the family, or is it your actual curse type? I think it's probably the former rather than the latter, but let me know what you think in the comments below. As far as stuff that is more about Storypath Ultra than Curseborne, we do have talk of the Ambusher Edge, which might be similar to an edge that's in Trinity Continuum. I'm not sure about that. And we do have social tricks, which are equivalent to the tricks or stunts that are in Trinity Continuum, which are effectively extra effects that you can put when you roll really well on a roll. They did talk about resources, so they had enhancements. They added enhancements when they used their resources to bribe someone so that they were allowed into a building. So they were like, I have resources too, that gives me an enhancement of +2, which means 2 auto successes if I roll at least 1 success on a roll. There are talk of favors. I'm not sure if they're part of the system itself or if it's only Curseborne that has this, but essentially you can spend a 1 dot or 2 dot or possibly even a 3 dot favor in order to get some sort of benefit. 1 seems to be a minor favor, which we didn't see, but 2 dot, the person will do something of significant value to you and could possibly be dangerous to that person for doing. Now let's talk about some of the abilities they use. Now I don't know if these abilities are edges or some key aspect of the template that they're using, but I do know that Eddy and Dixie both use the quick read ability or quick reading ability, which allowed them to ask questions in the scene. This was stuff like, is this person looking to fight or run away? Do they have a connection to someone in the scene, and who is it? Are they a supernatural, and are they what type of supernatural are they? Now, they were able to spend some momentum to ask a follow-up question. This seems like a generic ability that might be part of Storypath Ultra itself, but I'm not sure about that. Dixie did have something called a Hex, which is a type of Cursebinding, and it has multiple facets, which tells me that it's more like a spell than something that other people have. Now, the multiple facets, she said it's innervate, or innervation, which basically means that the target suffers a minor complication to physical actions. Now, that could be just one of the that is probably just one aspect of Hex. There might be more in there. If you've looked at the world below, that magic system is probably what we're going to get more than something that's from, say, Chronicles of Darkness. Dixie also used something called Sinproofed, which allowed her to know if there was an accursed or supernatural creature in the area, which tells me that not all supernatural creatures are accursed, but all accursed are supernatural creatures, likely. It had a secondary effect, which would only affect mortals, and that caused mortals to not remember her. There are a few abilities like this that have additional benefit if there is a supernatural or if there's a mortal in the area, or different effects depending on if a mortal or supernatural is being targeted. Eddy had another ability that was kind of like that, but there were no mortals in the area, so we didn't have that effect. She also had something called Undead Strength, which allowed her to add an enhancement to her social stuff. This seemed to be actually adding additional curse dice, but I don't know if that was a mistake or if it was what it was, the ability was actually doing. And Danielle said that the rules are in flux, and we'll just say that you can't use curse dice on this roll to buy off a complication. So that might not be in the Curseborne rules when they come out. Now we move on to Cassie, or Eddy's character, which had Logical Leap, which allowed them to pull a lead, and he said specifically that he could spend 1 momentum to give himself lip reading to be able to tell what they were talking about in this scene. That's about all we got from that. And then he used 3 curse dice to buy Aracanic Voice, which sounds like Arcana with IC at the end. That gave him +1 advantage to a social roll. Now, advantage is sort of like scale in Scion and Trinity Continuum. He essentially got a +2 enhancement to his die roll, and because the people around him did not have any advantage against social rolls. If they did, they would cancel each other out, or it would create a bigger gap, essentially, of how many dice he needed to get hits on. Because he spent all the curse dice, that's when the unearthly effect came up, and all bonds went to 0. And he did say, and I think this is an aspect of Aracanic Voice, where the mundanes, if they heard what his voice was saying, essentially they would have to follow it. And I'm not sure if I don't think Aracanic Voice caused him to lose his mask, but he did show a true form when he spent all his curse dice, which I think is what triggered it. And so everyone saw him as his Nephilim form, which he used before to get a bit of assistance in intimidating a mundane person. He let his mask slip ever so slightly, so someone got a bit put off by him and a bit freaked out. It wasn't a Masquerade breach from what I can tell, but I think that's because he did it so quickly that the person didn't really know what was going on. They did talk about how mundane and supernatural people were in the same bar, but it was just a bar that mundane people were allowed to be in, but supernaturals liked to hang out at, and it was owned by mundane people. Today's sponsor is Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland. It's a 90s post-apocalyptic inspired splatter of insanity that is inspired by RoboCop, Judge Dredd, and Toxic Avenger. You can find a discount link down below for a limited time. Izzy, on the other hand, for her Lycan abilities, Matthew did mention that he had a wild form, and Danielle said that he could transform into a wolf. However, Matthew did say that he would be like a saber-toothed tiger or attack people like Wolverine. Not sure if the wild form has to be a wolf. We'll see if that's the case when the book comes out. Now, he did say he had the ambush edge, which I had mentioned earlier, but he also said that he had a spell called Biting Assault, which to me doesn't sound like a spell, but who knows. It could be that they haven't finalized the terminology for spells in Curseborne yet, or it could just be that they do have spells. It seems like this might be similar to Sinproof and to Aracanic Voice, where it probably has a benefit against supernatural creatures and a benefit against mundane creatures. Other than that, we did have a character named Sam who was a fury, not a furry, a fury. At first I thought they were a berserker type character, but what I get from it is that they are spirits that can possess corpses. And they are often spoiling for fights, and apparently Sam might be over 100 years old, but we don't know that. Other than that, we do have some more lore information, which involves a mother who is the leader or matriarch of a family. It is not necessarily the birth mother. So that was talked about in reference to the Lykans and the Bathorites, but I feel like that is a relationship that exists in probably all of the accursed lines. However, Barnabas, who was a character in the Chronicle, was called the heir apparent to his mother. So it seems like Barnabas was going to be a new leader. I'm not sure if mother is a gender neutral term or if male leaders are called fathers, but it seems like there is a possibility for anyone, regardless of gender, to lead a family. Additionally, there were talk of a location called Deferments. Deferments are neutral grounds that are recognized by all the families that we know of. We don't know if there's a rogue family that is like, oh, we'll attack you on sight or anything like that. And the Bathorites have householdings, which are family-owned residents. They are owned by the entire Bathorite family, as it were. And if you own a house that is not part of a householding, it means that you have an illegal home, at least for the Bathorites. I don't know if any of the other factions have the same criteria. However, the Lykans had a term of territory in that they were once one of the buildings that was being used by someone off the grid, which was a penthouse rather. Izzy said, hey, let's incorporate this area into our territory. And that's pretty much it. That's all that we got for the most part. There's probably a few things that I missed. Someone did mention that there was also a curse path, but I'm not sure how true that was because I didn't hear that in my 3 or 4 listenings of the podcast, but I do listen on higher speed so that I can get this stuff out to you faster. My final thoughts on this is that this is definitely a Storypath game, a Storypath Ultra game. Onyx Path, for what it's worth, this is a upgrade, in my opinion, from the storyteller or storytelling system that Onyx Path and White Wolf have used in the past. It is a lot more concise. It keeps the numbers low for dice rolls, but it also makes up for it by giving you automatic successes and advantage as ways to make it so that not every roll is trivial because you're rolling a bucket of dice. Instead, you're rolling between about 1 and 10 dice, and you can have an enhancement up to +5, and if you have advantage up to a +2 or a +3 in difference between your target, you don't have to roll. And I like that because it keeps us from making dice rolls that are not relevant to a scene, and we can just say, okay, you critically hit, you critically succeed. As far as the mechanics go, the mechanics seem that they're very narrative focused, but they are not so narrative focused that we are giving the players the story guide or storyteller or game master abilities to just write whatever they want into the scene, which is an issue I have with Mage the Awakening. As far as the setting goes, this setting is much more unique than people will probably give it credit for from World of Darkness. The Accursed template seems to have a variety of main categories with subcategories underneath. For instance, Primal is where Lykans are. However, we don't know what the other types of primals are. Danielle did say that when Izzy went up to a primal, that they were able to identify that that primal was a Lycan and not another primal type. This makes me think that primals are a specific group together that have a shared lineage or backstory, whereas a primal and an outsider are probably completely separate, even though they both have family houses, I'm assuming. I will say that there were 3 locations that got name dropped. The Outside, the Battleground, the Crossroad, the 8 Hands did get mentioned, and another group also got mentioned, but I can't remember it right now. We don't know what they can do aside from maybe one specific person from that group. The game focuses on political intrigue, as well as mystery and horror and urban fantasy genre tropes. That being said, it's not going to be a replacement for Vampire the Masquerade or Chronicles of Darkness if you like those settings. It's its own unique setting with its own character types, history, lore, etc. that differentiates it from Chronicles and World of Darkness. Now, it is an urban fantasy game, but I don't think that means that we should be comparing it directly to those products as a way of saying, oh, they've just taken this product and filed off the serial numbers. It's sort of equivalent of saying, oh, World of Warcraft just took Lord of the Rings and filed off the serial numbers. It's telling its own different story. Similarly, you couldn't say that Game of Thrones is ripping off Lord of Rings, even though it was inspired by it. My opinion is, I really wish Onyx Path could continue making Chronicles of Darkness content. I know from the podcast episodes and things like that they would really love it if Paradox would greenlight new Chronicles of Darkness material and let them do work in the World of Darkness. But that just doesn't seem to be in the cards as Paradox pushes more development into Renegade Studio with things like V5, Werewolf 5, Hunter 5. I am really excited to see what Onyx Path does this. And because this is not linked to Chronicles of Darkness and World of Darkness, it means they can do their own thing. It means that they don't have to worry about Mage the Awakening players in how they describe people who are using magical abilities, because this isn't Mage the Awakening. You're not having this history of how the abilities worked, how the mechanics worked, and what fans expect. They're not going after fans, they are going after people who may have been interested in urban fantasy games, but want to see a different spin on it than World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness, which I think we should all take into consideration before we start saying things online about what Curseborne is. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to know more about Curseborne, I did do a video here talking about the quiz that Onyx Path put out on the Curseborne website. Please check it out. It has a lot of good information, and it goes in a little bit more detail about what I think the Outside and the Battlegrounds are in respect to some of the character types. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one. Shout out to our patrons for supporting the channel.